Go on, give it up at least for 24 hours. I'll bet you cannot. Technology's taken over almost every part of our life. So what is it doing to our mental, indeed our physical health? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Well, the chances are your phone is either in your hand or right beside you. Nobody here actually is doing that, and you may well be watching this show on your phone. How is technology dependency affecting us? Is there such a thing indeed? Is it time for a digital detox?
Around 3 billion people, that's 40% of the global population, use social media. But with an average 2 to 3 hours a day spent scrolling through timelines, are we living our lives through our devices rather than the real world? Is it affecting the way we interact with each other? And what impact is it having on our health? The average person picks up their smartphone almost 40 times a day, checking in, posting pictures and liking their peers' updates. Smartphone addiction is on the rise and can be as dangerous as being addicted to alcohol, smoking or gambling.
I think that this is a problem and related to selfies because when one becomes obsessed with something, it becomes an addiction. And then addiction blanks out everything else. You can't think when you're addicted, you live for your addiction.
Research has found the more you use social media, the more likely you are to develop depression, anxiety or feel socially isolated, a result of people spending more time chatting online rather than face to face. There's also the likelihood people will feel jealous and stressed when using social media after seeing constant updates on other people's picture-perfect lives.
We're just branding ourselves, like where we eat, where we are, where we live, who we hang out with, what we do, when we do it.
And it's not only mental health that's affected. The blue light from phones disrupts your sleeping patterns, increasing the risk of heart and lung disease, obesity and even cancer. The younger you are, the greater the effects of smartphones. Research in America has found that while teenagers are physically safer because they're more likely to stay indoors, they're mentally worse off than other generations. Growing up with this technology has changed every aspect of their lives. Rates of teen depression and suicide have increased in the last decade, and a lot of that can be linked back to how much teens use their phones.
Once you miss periods of social development, you can't come back and make them up. And these phones are causing there to be a change in regards to social development of children.
With the continuing rise of social media and technology, just how much will it impact future generations? Will we start to see an increase in mental health issues or even physical impairments? With smartphones still being a relatively new addition to our lives, will they change society for better or for worse?
Very pleased to say that joining us on Skype from Philadelphia, we have Catherine Price, who wrote the book How to Break Up with Your Phone. At the Roundtable, we have Jen Persson, Director of Defend Digital Me, which campaigns to improve children's data privacy and digital rights. And Leon Emirali, co-founder of media agency Crest Communications, also here making up the four guests. Duncan CJ, creator of the self-help podcast Spirit Pig, which aims to make people's lives more fulfilled. Great to have you all with us. Let's come to you first of all, Catherine. How to break up with your phone? Do we need to?
Yeah, I would argue that we do, but I should clarify that by breaking up with your phone, I don't mean dumping your phone or getting rid of it entirely. I mean taking a step back to evaluate your relationship and decide whether it's healthy and taking steps to make that relationship more healthy for you. I think right now we've allowed technology companies to define the relationship that we have with our devices without actually asking ourselves what we want those relationships to look like.
And you've got a 30-day program in this. How do you start?
Well, you start by taking a step back and actually asking what you want to pay attention to. So one of the things the book comes back to is this idea that our lives are what we pay attention to, and we only have a finite amount of time and attention. So anytime we're making a decision in the moment about how to spend our time and attention, we're really making a decision about how we want to spend our lives. And there's no judgment attached to that. If you want to spend, the average person now is spending something like 4 hours a day on their smartphones. If you want to do that, that's your decision. But I think a lot of us are not aware of how much time we're spending on our phones and what things, other things in our lives that our phones are getting in the way of.
You see 4 hours a day. I mean, when you take out sleeping, when you take out waking hours, when you take out eating, drinking, walking, doing simple things like driving the car, that is the vast majority of your downtime, isn't it? We are living our lives through our devices.
Yeah, I was just nodding my head with what you said, because I think so much of our use of it is just default. We're almost sleepwalking. We're into using Instagram, Facebook the whole time. We're not even thinking about it. And I think we just need to stop and ask ourselves some simple questions, like, is this adding value to my life? If yes, then great, continue as you are. Like you said, it's not that I think technology or any of these social medias are good or bad. I think that's the wrong question. It's, is this adding value to my life? And if no, then either change something about the way you use it or stop it altogether.
Okay, so how do you work out whether it's adding value to your life? What do you think?
Well, we focus particularly on young people, and I think for them it's quite hard sometimes to even have that choice. So they perhaps have to use their phones in school, they have to use internet for homework, for all sorts of things that they're required to. So it's not only a question of having value and other people's values perhaps forced on them, but also other people's requiring them to use it.
See, we've gone past the stage where you can say to Janet or John, go and look it up in a book, because nobody else does that. They have to use the internet.
They have to use the internet, and so the question is then, how do they use it wisely, and how does they use it healthily and have that good balanced relationship with the things that it offers and its risks and harms?
How have we ever got to the stage where we are so dependent on something like this? Because take it away and it'd be like pulling away a rug from under your feet, wouldn't it? You'd be flat on your face.
I think there's a degree of moral panic here. I think if we use history with some context, you know, Elvis in the 1950s, we were told that him swiveling his hips was going to be poisoning the minds of the young, and it didn't. And we look at video games in the 1990s, and we were told that that was going to be the downfall of society, and it wasn't. And I think we're seeing the same thing with social media. I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I don't think we truly understand the impact that it has on us as individuals and society as a whole.
Well, some of the things pointed out. Catherine, yeah, jump in. I'll come back.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that I think that's definitely true. We have a long history of panicking about things. My favorite example is in Victorian England that kaleidoscopes were a cause of moral concern because people were walking around, much like we do with our smartphones, looking at them in the streets and walking into things. But two things I think are very different with our smartphones. And the first is that we have them with us at all times. You can't really carry around a desktop computer or like a video game arcade console thing. And then second, they are specifically engineered and designed to grab our attention from us. I agree with everyone that there's not necessarily a morality to the technology itself, but I do think we have to recognize, as some of the advocates in this field point out, that this is different in the sense that there's a manipulation coming from the technology in a way that a technology of the past, whether it be a book or the television or the radio, was not able to do. They were not able to listen to you and decide when to interrupt you or get in the way of what you were doing in the same way.
You see, I wonder how much you believe those statements in the reporter piece, that it causes problems with your sleep pattern, that it causes depression, it causes anxiety. If it does any one of those things, then it's bad, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think actually flip that around, and I think it brings a lot of good behaviours.
Do you believe that, first of all?
Not necessarily. I don't think there's enough of a body of evidence to make those claims yet. I mean, social media's only been around for a very small amount of time in the way that we use it now. Instagram 7 years old, Facebook 14 years old. Not long enough for us to properly recognise the impact that it's having. So I'm
Screens
not sure.
per se.
Excuse me, look, I'm sure if you're looking at a bright light constantly, that's probably not good. But you have to recognise that, and I think everyone does. That if you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning scrolling through your Facebook feed, looking at pictures of talking cats and fluffy animals, that's not a healthy behaviour. And I think we just have to recognise what is healthy and what isn't, and sort of self-regulate.
I think that I agree up to the point that there wasn't a great body of evidence, but now, when did the iPhone come out? 2007. So I think it's now been.
Is that when it came out?
It
so
came
it's
out
only just slightly more than 10 years old.
Exactly. I think it was
Goodness
August
gracious.
2007. And so I think that argument of that we don't know, it's still too soon, was a valid argument for the first 5 years, but actually now there is actually a body of evidence starting to show all those things from the piece.
But I mean, I can read in the paper one day that 2 glasses of wine are going to keep me living till I'm 120 a day, and the next day read that 1 glass of wine a day is going to shorten my life by 30 minutes every single day. I mean, you don't know who to believe, do you?
Well, that's nutrition.
Yeah, no, go, Catherine, and then we'll come back to Jen.
I was going to say that that's nutrition science, which I also report on. That's a totally disastrous area to compare things to. But I think what we need to point out, I asked the same question to a guy, Ramsey Brown, who's a neuroscientist who started this startup meant to use the same technology to do good things. I think what we need to recognize is that we do actually very well understand the dopamine system in our brains, which is the reward system that teaches us when we've done something that's worth repeating, and it's activated during things like food and sex. And we need to recognize that our phones are specifically designed to trigger the release of dopamine in our brains to make us want to keep using them, because that's the business motive of a lot of the apps that we use on our phones, as we're becoming increasingly aware of with the Cambridge Analytica.
Do you think that's just an end result of what they do, or are they designed to do that?
They're designed to. I mean, they're designed to keep you on it. And there are many other design elements in the phones. If you start to compare phones with slot machines and phones with casinos, you'll start to see a lot of similarities. For example, there are no clocks in casinos because they don't want you to know what time it is. Social media feeds are endless. You can keep going. They don't have to be that way, but the designers don't want to give you any stopping cue, it's called, that might make you say, wait a second, I actually don't, to actually have that moment of personal awareness that you were just referring to let you get out of it. So I think we need to be much more aware as consumers of the design elements that are built into these apps that are manipulating our brain chemistry in ways that are very well understood and very consciously manipulated. So I do think that it's not just our faults or not our personal responsibility. There's other stuff going on here that we need to be aware of.
Luring us in. Jen, you wanted to say something in response to what had been said at the table, then
yeah, well, I think Catherine's right in that a lot of these apps are designed to grab your attention and keep your attention. And what we have to be careful around is some of the moral panic now around screen time limitation for children, particularly young people. So even our minister recently said he would recommend imposing...
This was Matt Hancock, wasn't it? Yeah.
Imposed
known to be pretty savvy when it comes to these things.
Well,
technically savvy, not necessarily morally. That's your call.
He does, indeed. So we would say, how would that work in reality? And of course, you could then impose with the new age verification technology that's coming in with the European data protection regulation, a requirement on children or under 13 users to have limitations on their screen time, but that would interrupt their participation rights and their ability to access gaming or to access no,
but that's the point, isn't it? It should interrupt their access to gaming sites and also, so on.
But how would you then decide who has that right to decide? And I think that's the important thing, is the control element, whether somebody imposes that control or whether you have consent and a choice over that.
But Catherine's point is that as a parent, she has decided she does not want her young daughter to think that this is something that should be one of the most important aspects of family life. Therefore, you as a parent must make that decision rather than the government, yeah?
And if you have that right as a parent, that's much more important than perhaps the government coming out with an imposed regulation at this stage. But certainly, Catherine, would agree with you that our apps are designed to grab attention, and it's attention that is important. And that's what's hidden most of the time, especially from children, is they don't see, perhaps they can see the content that they upload, that they get likes for, that they get that positive feedback from, but they're not seeing how companies are using them and their data behind the scenes. And that's something that we need much better education around, and to be able to give children and young people particularly that digital control back.
You see, one of the things that I have a problem with, and I'm sure everybody has an opinion on this, so do weigh in, is that what we are presenting, that's we, the wider world, are presenting everybody with, but it's normally those that are most easily influenced, is not reality. It is a twisted and perverted, in many ways, sense of reality. It's very difficult, for example, to work out what is real and what is not. That's why it's called a virtual reality.
Yeah, well,
unhealthy in so many ways.
We were talking just beforehand about the Instagram and how, even though I guess if you really sit down and think about it, we understand, if we really think that yes, everyone is putting forward their best self. So this is me on my perfect holiday. This is my fantastic brunch. This is my wonderful relationship, and so we understand that, but. there is, it's, you know, be it Sunday night and you're feeling low, you know, there is this link with loneliness. But on the one hand, you can't argue that, okay, people shouldn't be sharing their memories in case it makes a few people lonely. And so I guess it's an interesting dance.
Well, I think it's bloody odd that people want to share pictures of themselves eating an ice cream anyway. But, you know, I mean, that's a different story.
I think, you know, going back to that point, I think you have to view social media through that prism. And it's like when you consume a newspaper with a political bias, you know you're reading The Guardian, it's got a left-wing slant, you know you're reading The Mail, it's got a right-wing slant. Sure. And when you're seeing and consuming social media content, it's the same kind of thing. And if you know, and I do, when I see my friends in real life and I see their Instagram life, there's a massive difference between the two. And I think as long as you're aware of that and you're sort of safe in that knowledge, it shouldn't do anything to your self-esteem.
Let's listen to Catherine now, because I have a point I would like to ask you. And that is, take the four of us sitting at this table through the best things we can do if we want to become better social media phone animals.
First, I think just to touch upon a relevant point from a little earlier, I think that we need to stop thinking about this in terms of restriction and control, because no one likes restriction and control, and instead talk about it as an act of actually giving us more freedom to choose what we want to do. So I think about this as it's not about spending less time on your phone or less time on social media. It's about spending more time on your life. And therefore, by becoming more aware of how you feel when you use these things, you're giving yourself a gift. So my first step for people, for their social media animal, whatever, would be to just start paying attention to how you feel before, during, and after using social media. Because a lot of times we keep using it compulsively as a result of a lot of these design elements, again, built in to manipulate us, without actually checking in with ourselves to say, do I actually enjoy looking at my friend's brunch? And again, if you do, you're weird, but that's great. Go ahead. You can hold the brunch. I actually know someone who just looks at cake icing videos. That's her thing.
Say that again. I missed it. They like you know what?
Cake icing, cake, like decorating cakes. And she thought about it, and she loves watching people decorate cakes. So her thing was to recognize, okay, I feel good doing it 10 minutes. Doing it for an hour makes me feel like I've eaten the entire cake. So I'd say to start paying attention to your own experience. And I would also recommend deleting the apps from your phone. And I don't say that to restrict you from using social media. You can use it if you want to, but the apps are specifically designed very effectively to get you to keep using them compulsively. And if you create a small speed bump for yourself, a little obstacle that forces you to slow down, makes it a little bit less easy, you're more likely to then act as a result of consciousness instead of habit. So get the apps off, experiment with it for a couple of days. You can always reinstall them, and try just looking at the social media feeds through the much clunkier browser version, ideally on your desktop or on your phone.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll be back with you in just a moment. So listen to what Catherine has had to say. Does it make sense?
Some of the harms I think you come to from using these apps and feeling like you're missing out if you don't take part are actually quite hard, especially for young people. If you're told to delete your apps, you'd actually feel that real sense of anxiety around. So they don't necessarily have that freedom to feel that they use they should or shouldn't use an app, but they need to use it safely.
It's a bit like that old thing when you were the only person in the class not to get invited to the party.
Exactly. But fear of missing out is real, and it's something, in fact, a lot of parents don't yet understand. I think 40% of parents don't know what FOMO is, but children, FOMO, fear of missing out.
Okay.
So I think the Royal Society of Public Health in 2017 did a lot of work around status of mind. So state of mind and the psychological impacts on children. But they found that a lot of the harms that children feel online are the same as they feel offline. And so we need to think about how do we deal with anxiety, depression, cyberbullying, a lack of sleep, being unable to switch off, and that fear of how do I present myself to my peers and my identity offline as much as we do online, and not to necessarily blame the technology for it, for those problems.
I think all these problems are real, and they're definitely a concern, and they need to be addressed. But I think before we start really scaremongering and getting running, thinking the world is coming to an end, like we said, it's smartphones, 10, 11 years old. The internet's only been publicly available, I think, since August 1991. So I feel like we're really in our infancy in all this stuff, and we're kind of learning how to walk, and we're keep on bumping into things, and we're getting things wrong, and we're making a lot of mess. But I think that's just inevitable. It's a brand new technology, and it's kind of the wild, wild west. And while we kind of understand how it all works, then we're gonna mess up.
And yet what makes this world a wonderful place is the fact that you can hear things, you can smell things, you can talk to people, you can relate, you can get emotions, you can get physical contact, none of which is available this way.
Well, I'd argue on that. I think actually that digital media is bringing us closer to the physical world, because look, 5 or 10 years ago, it's a nice day, it's a nice weekend. You don't know what to do. You might do one of the 2 or 3 things you do every other weekend, you know. So with social media, with digital media, it's brought us into a new world. It's allowed us to explore things we didn't know about. It's got masses of information at our fingertips.
No, you mean it's a nice day outside?
It's a nice day outside.
Well, all it's going to tell us is where you can go. Go to
well,
the
exactly.
beach, go
but
for a picnic.
we wouldn't have known that otherwise. We wouldn't have known what's open.
Of course you would. You'd have looked in your local newspaper.
Well, maybe we're a different generation, David. But I think there is. I think it does bring the digital world and the physical world come
closer together. You'd have called your mum.
Maybe I would have done.
Catherine, yeah, go on. You're enjoying yourself.
No, well, I do feel distanced from you. I mean, obviously, I'm in Philadelphia, although this is actually a really good example where we're able to have this conversation, which is amazing, in real time across an ocean. But it's not the same as being with you guys, you know. I feel a little alone in my kitchen right now.
Well, next time, come over.
That sounds great. But I think that, you know, the point is, well, in terms of the going outside thing, well, there's lots to talk about, but it is a good example of how if you did want to find out about something, you do have a tool now that will make it very easy for you to find out stuff people are doing, which could be a good thing, but you also have the risk of then getting so sucked into your anxiety over choosing one of those things, or just getting sucked in general, that instead of going outside and taking a walk or doing anything outside, you're just at home scrolling and trying to make a decision.
This is it.
What Jen referred to as FOMO, which is truly a real thing, and you really do have stress hormones that are released in response to that.
This reminds me so much of when I first went into an American supermarket when I went to live in the States, and I said, I'd like some salad dressing, and 3 minutes later, the shop assistant hadn't finished, telling me how many different... Choice is a terrible thing. It can confuse you more and more.
I was going to say, there's a guy, Paradox of Choice. There's a professor called Barry Schwartz, and he did a TED Talk about this, and he's got a book about the paradox of choice and how it's this overwhelm. Like you said, you normally have a salad dressing. Okay, do I want balsamic or do I want Caesar? Cool, easy. Now you have 30 choices, and it's screw it.
But that's a question then about us as human beings rather than about the social media or digital media space that we're operating in. I think that's just us. That's a flaw in humanity rather than anything else.
And you've also got the question of those choices being imposed by other people. So you've got to be really careful, I think, right now around the debate around social media and whether you are limiting your access and pushing the responsibility back to the child or the young person or your adult who is then actually taking responsibility for what the social corporate responsibility that companies need to be taking. And as Catherine was saying about they're grabbing your attention, trying to marketize your time and advertise to you and giving you that presented as choice, but actually all those salad dressings being available from the one company. And that monopoly of power and control that company then has over the offering that you then take part in is actually limiting your choice. And I think that's something we really need to look at in addressing how much we're consolidating power over the access of social media
and
platforms
yet part
today.
of the story of growing up and becoming a more mature, rounded person is being able to filter. And that's what you do best, isn't it? You decide what is right for you. Just a quick question, because we're running out of time, I'm afraid to say. Who's got a phone with them in the studio? Only one. Catherine, you've left yours outside?
And I've got mine here, I've turned it off.
Okay, you've both turned it off.
Outside.
Okay, Jen's is outside.
You'll be impressed by the phone there.
Catherine, have you got yours near you?
I think it is, because it was my alarm clock, which it shouldn't be. It's like the biggest thing not to do, but I have a 3-year-old that's normally my alarm clock.
And what else will you do with it today? Nothing at all, because you're against it.
No, I'm not against phones. Phones are amazing tools. I still have a phone. It probably is. But here, actually, this makes a really good point. If I can find it, I do. So I have a sticker on the back of my phone that says, what do you want to pay attention to? And I think that is what, to me, all of this comes back to. It's awareness. It's awareness of how our phones are designed to manipulate us. It's awareness of what we feel like when we're on them.
Will you hold that up one more time?
Oh, sorry. And I have these on the book has a website, phonebreakup.com, and I created lock screen images.
Yeah.
Phonebreakup.com. The lock screen images that say the same thing, you probably can't see that, but it's the same kind of image.
Okay.
And
you know, phonebreakup.com, and I can see why you don't want to use it all the time. It's the same size as your head, by the way we're looking at it.
That's true, which is huge in this. But, you know, paying attention, and I think it's actually very interesting to realize that the mere act of paying attention to your own experience has been proven to be one of the most powerful tools for behavior change. There are these very interesting studies done by Judson Brewer, who's now at the University of Massachusetts, using just paying attention to your experience and mindfulness as a tool to help people quit smoking. And when he did these experiments, he was hoping it might be equivalent to the American Lung Association's gold standard program, but in fact found out at the end that the people who merely practiced paying attention to how they felt succeeded at 2 times the rate of the other people and 5 times in the long term.
Well, thank you so much. Time has stood still for us. It's also stood still in Philadelphia. 2 minutes to 6 it's been since the start of the program. We'll let you get back to real time, Catherine. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you all for coming in. By way of an addition, I should mention the fact that we are on social media. You can find Roundtable at YouTube. This particular program probably going to be there within 24 hours if you're not able to watch it in the regular way. Thank you very much indeed. We have, 15 seconds, and then you can turn your devices on. Or perhaps you could decide not to for the rest of the day. I'm David Foster. Thank you to all of my guests for joining us on this edition of Roundtable. Hope to have your company next time. Goodbye for now.